Okay, so today in class we're going to make banana nut bread. This is one of my favorite recipes for banana nut bread because it has a lot of unusual ingredients that you normally don't find in a banana nut bread. So let's first talk about the ingredients. We have an all-purpose flour. Make sure that flour is sifted. Light brown sugar. We're also going to use very ripe bananas. Make sure they're ripe and smashed. Walnuts that need to be toasted and chopped. Unsalted butter. Make sure it's at room temperature and it's also soft. Make sure your eggs that you're using are also at room temperature. We're going to have honey, vanilla, salt, baking soda, baking powder, cinnamon, nutmeg, and orange marmalade. This marmalade happens to be marmalade that I made over the summer. First, let's start by putting the butter in your mixer. Make sure that butter is very soft. If it's not soft, you're going to find that it's not going to incorporate very well, and you're going to end up with chunks of butter in your banana nut bread. When it's baked, the butter will melt. It will leave a large hole in your bread. Next, we're going to add the brown sugar, the vanilla, salt, baking soda, baking powder, cinnamon, and the nutmeg. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our mixers on. We're going to use a paddle attachment and we're going to turn this up to high speed. We're doing what's called a creaming method. We're creaming the butter along with the sugar. By doing this, you're encapsulating all the sugar with butter so that when that sugar melts, it leaves a hole. And that sugar, the tiny little hole that's leaving behind, is going to heat up and that's going to help your bread to rise. Okay, so it's kind of like a leavening action happening here. We're using baking soda and baking powder. That's also going to help. So it's a combination of all three of those happening here. We're going to do the creaming method for about 5 minutes. You're going to see it's going to start to get kind of lighter in color and it might get even just a tiny bit on the fluffier side. Don't forget to scrape that bowl all the way down to the bottom. If you don't, at the end of the process of mixing everything, you're going to find chunks of butter, chunks of cinnamon, things like that in the bottom of your mixing bowl. You don't want that. We want a nice, cohesive batter. Next goes in the bananas. Now we want to make sure those bananas are super ripe. The riper the banana, the sweeter they're going to be, and also more of a banana flavor. Next is going to go in that orange marmalade. You could also use apricot. I've done the same recipe with a cherry jam. That turned out very well also. And we're also going to put the honey in. So the honey is going to do a couple things in this recipe. It's going to add sweetness. It's going to add the honey flavor. But it's also going to incorporate some moisture. But it's also an acid. Honey is an acid. It's about 3.9 pH level. And that acid in the honey is going to react with the baking soda. That's going to cause carbon dioxide to form. That carbon dioxide bubbles are going to heat up, expand, and cause a leavening action in our banana nut bread. So let's go ahead and add your room temperature eggs one at a time. Very important that they're room temperature. If they're cold, what's going to happen? That's going to chill down the butter and the butter's going to start to start to get hard again. We don't want that to happen. So make sure that eggs are always at room temperature. Again, scrape down to the bottom of your bowl while you're mixing. Make sure everything is incorporated so you have a nice even batter at the end. Next, we're going to go ahead and put the flour in. Make sure that flour is sifted. By sifting the flour, you're getting out any large particles. You're also aerating the flour. That also helps with leavening. Now, at this point, we're just going to mix until incorporated. If you were to mix too long, what's going to happen is the gluten is going to start to form in your banana nut bread. And we don't want a tough, chewy banana nut bread. So we want to use a all-purpose flour, which has less protein in it. And we also don't want to mix it too much. So we're just going to mix until incorporated. Next, we're going to throw in those toasted walnuts and give it a couple stirs. Done. Okay, so let's get that batter out of the bowl. Make sure you scrape down that paddle. Let's give it just one last stir, scraping everything from the bottom. Make sure all of the nuts are incorporated, evenly distributed. Take our loaf pan. Let's do a quick spray with Pam or some other type of fat spray, or you could even use butter if you wanted to. And let's go ahead and put our batter into the pan. Now you want to be careful that you're not getting batter up the sides of the pan. What's going to happen if you do that? That batter that's up on the side of the pan is going to burn. It could possibly fall back down into the batter after it's burnt, and you end up with a hard chunk of batter in your banana nut bread. We don't want that. Go ahead and smooth it out. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just want a nice even layer. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the banana nut bread in the oven, but first we're going to cover it with foil, and we're going to bake at 325. Now the reason why we're going to bake it with tinfoil on it is it's going to help keep the bread from browning too fast. Okay, after 45 minutes we're going to go ahead and take off the aluminum foil, and then we're going to bake it for another 20-25 minutes. Okay, we have banana nut bread. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and test it. We're going to use a toothpick. If the toothpick comes out with a couple crumbs on it, that's totally fine. We just don't want those crumbs to be a batter. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get our banana nut bread out of that pan. You want to do that as soon as possible, because if you don't, condensation will start to form on the bottom and cause the bread to be soggy on the bottom. We don't want that. Now, I would wait to cool a little bit before you cut it, though. You don't want to cut it when it's too hot. Now, I'm not saying you can't cut it when it's warm, because we all love warm banana nut bread. But you don't want to cut it when it's too hot. What happens is the gelatinization of the flour hasn't completely formed, so you want it to cool just a tiny bit. Okay, so there's our banana nut bread. I hope you enjoy it. I've made this banana nut bread probably 3-4 times this summer. It's very easy bread to make. It freezes very well. You could use the jam, or you could leave the jam out, the marmalade, or you can replace it with something else. It's your choice. Okay? So I hope you enjoy this recipe. Let me know what you think. Have a great day.